Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session today. So this is going to be a brief presentation on Mitacs and the Canadian Science Policy Fellowship Program. So just an introductory cursory look at what the program involves. And there's opportunity for questions and an answer period after as well. So I'll just get started. I'll kick it off. So my name is Sara Miller, and I'm a manager of program operations at Mitacs. And if you haven't heard of Mitacs, we don't do taxes. Ironically, we are actually a national not-for-profit organization, and we deliver research and training programs across Canada. Our mandate is really to support social and economic innovation. So we're really in that scope and that space of building bridges and connecting Canadian companies, governments, and organizations with Canada's top talent. So really that bridge between academia, industry, government, and using those networks to drive innovation in Canada. So the scope of our organization, just for your information, we're pretty big. We've been around for about 20 years. We have 25 offices across Canada. We've supported more than 20,000 research projects, trained more than 33,000 students and postdocs, and we've supported more than 3,600 international research collaborations. So as far as not-for-profits go, we're pretty big. And all this really to say that we do have a vast network, and what we do is we use that network to deploy Canadian talent to our innovation challenges, and we do that through the delivery of our programs. So I'm here today to introduce the Canadian Science Policy Fellowship Program. If you haven't heard it, we actually have some of our policy fellows attending this conference, and they're at some of them are presenting and some of them are attending, so you might have run into them already. But we'll go over it a little bit. So what is the Canadian Science Policy Fellowship Program? So it really is a 12-month fellowship where we place PhD holders for an immersion into the policy-making process. And so that's through a government host office. Host offices are providing policy positions that fellows would apply their scientific expertise to really help solve a policy challenge or inform a policy decision. So the idea is really building that bridge between academia and government to support evidence-based policy decision-making. So in that way, you know, when we think about what Mitacs' mandate is, we're deploying Canada's top talent to address innovation challenges, but more in the policy sphere. I will say this is relatively new for us. So we've been around over 20 years, but this program we launched in 2016. So to date, we've had 4 successful cohorts completed. And we just have our 5th cohort starting now. So they start between October and December this year. We've had to make a few changes to accommodate for COVID. And so the ones who are just getting their fellowship started, those would be the ones who are at the conference. And as you see here on the competitive, under the light bulb, this is a competitive program. So typically every year we're seeing about 140 to 170 fellows apply to the program. So PhD holders who are interested in participating in a fellowship, and that'll convert to about 17 on average. So sometimes we've seen them as high as 23, we've seen them as low as 11. So it really depends on, you know, the host office's capability of hosting and the amount of fellow applications we get any given year. You can find all of these numbers on our website if you're interested. I personally wrote the website content, so it's all of those questions that policy wonks might be interested in understanding. Those should be in the website if you have a nice deep dive and you're interested in getting into the weeds. And we've also seen, just for your interest, a pretty even split between social sciences and natural sciences in terms of how the matched placements fall out. So, you know, sometimes it'll shift from 60% one year being in the natural sciences, and other times we'll see it in the opposite. So overall, we do see a pretty healthy split between those two, social sciences and the natural sciences. And really the overall goal is that fellows' skills, expertise, and research experience is applied to a host office's policy issue. So next we'll talk about why participate. What are the benefits? So if you're a government and you have a policy challenge in your department, really what this program would offer to you is bringing in that top talent. So we have our own review and adjudication process that we do for fellows who apply. So I had mentioned we see between 140, 170 applicants come in. And what we do is we vet those and we create a short list. And that's done through a fellow adjudication committee who is composed of previous fellows. So what we're doing is really just assessing applicants, making sure there is clear interest for fellows who want to apply their expertise in a public setting. And we vet for just ensuring that on a few criteria that we're not passing on any fellows that we can see off the top wouldn't be successful in this kind of a placement. So that's the kind of benefit you get as a host office coming through this program. So it does reduce that administrative burden and the risk associated with hiring a full-time employee or even employee on a contract. We bring in a very specialized, highly talented pool of PhD holders. And so the Mitacs postdocs that are applying to these programs, they've typically got a really great track record of their research. And so they really are experts in their fields that can provide some really valuable insights into whatever key policy challenges your office is thinking about. And, of course, what we're doing by bridging policy and science is we're, moving forward, we're advancing data-supported rationales for critical decision-making. So that higher picture is that Canada is getting this benefit of evidence-supported policy. If you're a fellow, why would you want to participate in this? So it's a really great opportunity for fellows to develop new skills and build a network while helping to shape public policy. So it's a really great networking opportunity for these fellows. I'm just seeing the presentation is changing a little bit than what's on my screen. So I'll try to make sure these match up. So hopefully you're seeing the benefits to the fellows piece. There we go. Okay. So what fellows do get is that network. And so they are getting they're in a cohort, so they're meeting with other fellows who are doing this, and they're also getting a chance to apply their research in a different way. So getting outside of the academic environment and really looking at the application of decision making through a policy lens. And so the position or the fellowship would offer full-time hours. You're participating for 12 months, and we ask hosts to provide a salary of between $70,000 to $80,000, depending on the position they're offering. Another really great benefit of the program is that fellows get a whole tailored professional development training and networking program for them. And so with being a fellow, there's a really great orientation session. CSPC actually, who's hosting this conference, they help us deliver in some of the orientation pieces. So we've got a couple of different experts in really sharing some of the challenges and opportunities with transitioning from an academic setting into a policy setting, and in moving that really self-directed research into applied policy making and what it means to work with the bureaucracy. So it's really interesting and valuable training. And there are also opportunities for growing your network, science communication, science diplomacy. So all sorts of different training to really support fellows and really share that perspective of the benefit of evidence-based policymaking. And of course, the bigger picture, you're really learning about policymaking in the public service through that hands-on piece. And so it's a really great opportunity for both government and fellows. So on the next slide, what does it look like? So what does it look like to be participating in a fellowship? So just really from beginning to end here, this is a very high level summary, so it's pretty complicated. But what we do is we open a competitive call in the fall of every year, and that's really for fellowships to start in the subsequent fall. So right now, for example, we have a cohort who's starting, and they would have applied last fall. And we have an open call right now, and it'll close in February, the beginning of February for fellows and the beginning of March for hosts. And that is really to start next fall. And so it takes a whole year to do the application, to do the adjudication, and then to really facilitate an interview period and matching. And so it takes a full year, and it's a double-blind call. So that means hosts and fellows are actually applying at the same time. And you know, you might ask why and how we came to that method. It's just a time-tested method we've seen. Fellows are applying to the program, and they're providing information such as their academic background, you know, their expertise. They're answering questions about their interest in public policy, and we're vetting in that way, providing a short list. And then whenever hosts have applied for a position and they're successful, we send a short list to them, and they can filter along academic disciplines or whatever it is they want to filter for. So it's double blind. We've found in the past that whenever we have postdocs applying for positions, just because of the nature of public service, what might be a priority one fall, by the time the next fall comes around, might be totally different. And we ended up with some unsatisfactory results. So this one is really more flexible. It's intended to really think at the higher level, not just apply to a specific policy issue or position. It's really the idea that it's addressing a policy challenge for the department. So as you can see, it's competitive. I mentioned we get a lot of applications in, and we do the fellow adjudication process from previous fellows who are able to, they have a scoring rubric, and they really, essentially we find that we typically see, there's not a specific threshold, but where there's really low performance or low scoring, we'll cut off, and we see about 80% move on to the shortlist. So it's still a pretty big pool that that host offices can pick from. And so once the host call closes, we send that pre-vetted, that short list of fellows to hosts, and they agree, of course, to providing a science policy position in their department at the agreed upon rate and at the agreed upon timeline. So just to kick off, like I had mentioned, we provide an orientation and training to ensure that fellows are being deployed essentially ready. There is a learning curve taking on any new position, of course, and it's a, you know, government is its own culture for sure. So there's definitely that the training is really directed to set up fellows to understand that background of it. And then on the fellow side, so you begin and you're taking a 12-month commitment to your department. So we really try to keep it to a September to August cohort. I will say this year has been our COVID cohort, and we've allowed for this 2020-21 cohort to really start we've seen it between October and December, and we're allowing for virtual. So normally we actually have fellows during the, you know, the matching process, they're actually planning to relocate and work from Ottawa or wherever the host location is. So in a nutshell, that's what our program looks like. I'll just switch slides to the next one. And I'll share a little bit of information on our numbers and some an overview of our timeline will follow as well. So we've been doing this, as I mentioned, for about 4 years, and we're going on our 5th year. And just below is a list of the organizations, the host offices we've worked with. So, you know, it really stems across all types of host offices, and we've even had some partnerships with provincial and municipal governments as well. So although the training is mostly directed towards that federal experience, we have piloted out working with provinces and cities. So next is a timeline, and this is just really to showcase what it looks like over the course of a year to deliver the program. So as you can see, it's really like a fall to fall kind of a calendar for applying to this program. So typically the end of November, we'll open a call for applications. And I had mentioned it's double blind. So you have the fellows on top who are opening up their, we have the fellows on top who are opening up their call for applications, and that's open from late November to the beginning of February. And then at the same time, we have that open call for hosts, and that's the end of November, and that goes to the beginning of March. So that gives us time to adjudicate the fellow applications, create a short list, and send that to the host offices. We also find host offices need a bit of extra time as they think about bringing on a new position and what that might mean for their HR departments. I will mention it does split. If you notice the start to the end, it does split between 2 fiscal years. And so that's been a good strategy for some host offices to be able to split the budget up. And then our adjudication happens over really the spring, and going into May, we really want to see those interviews happening. So hosts are reviewing a list, they're picking candidates who they think are strong fits, and there's a matching period. So Mitacs facilitates the matching. After the interview period is closed up, we ask fellows to rank, and we ask host offices to rank too. And so, it is a matching process. Sometimes you don't end up with your number one, but the idea and the rationale behind it is you're going in to maximize the amount of opportunities for people. And so we want to see the greatest number of people be able to participate in this kind of experience. And then August really is where you're doing the preparation. So if we're not under COVID and it's a regular year, you're thinking about relocating, you're getting all your ducks in a row to fully immerse yourself into this placement. And we like to see them begin in September. So next up, I'll just walk through a couple of examples so everyone can see what kinds of opportunities are out there. So here's one. The title was Applying Behavioral Science to Increase the Use of Public Services. So, if we look at the fellow, the issue, and the outcome, so we had a fellow coming in, PhD holder, who was an expert in their field in visual attention and long-term memory. So they had expertise and an academic background in psychology, neuroscience, human behavior. The issue was, so this was the policy challenge, citizens don't always take advantage of or really understand the provincial services or regulations. So the example provided here was a business owner is confused about how to pay taxes and they missed the deadline. And what the outcome was from this fellow applying their academic expertise to the policy challenge was they developed recommendations for that host office for solutions to foster the uptake of and compliance with these provincially managed services. And we have a couple of examples like this. So the next one we have is it's neat. It's in the health field. So this one, the fellow was a microbiology expert, and they actually had an internship at the WHO, the World Health Organization. And so the policy challenge they came to solve was taking a leadership role in an international biosafety network and really be a member of a global alliance working to strengthen a response and protocol to high consequence diseases. And so what the outcome ended up being was through training, they provided a training gap analysis report, operational capability and competency matrix, preparation of best practices and process maps, and an emergency communications protocol. So you could see this fellow actually really had a high impact in their fellowship in changing the way we do business effectively and the way we roll out policies for the Canadian public. The next one we have, and this is just the last example we'll show, it's a pretty neat one, understanding human enhancement technology for soldiers. So this one, the fellow was coming in with some neuroscience and physiology, cognition, and ethics background. So really interesting. And the issue was thinking about, okay, what are the policy issues and risks that might arise if we're using these disruptive sorts of technologies for soldiers in combat? And the outcome was providing Canada's Defence Research and Development host office. So this is really the host office that's responsible for these research and development for technology to be deployed for Canada's armed services. And so they got to provide their host office with a view of the ethics and policy landscape. So really having that impact on looking at, you know, all of the technologically enhanced future capabilities involved in cognitive, robotic, and physiological methods for those types of applications. So very neat stuff. You know, we've got some outcomes for where people land after doing a fellowship. So as you can see, we've broken it down. We do try to track where fellows end up and what the impact is of participating in a program like this. So we've been able to track some data back from the fellows who participated over 2016 and 17 and 2017 and 18, and we see the breakdown of where they are now today. So about 50% of them stayed in academia, or sorry, stayed in the public service. About 25% went back to academia, and then the other 25% went into the private sector or not-for-profit sector. And this is a really great outcome for us. We don't want to see necessarily 100% retention rate in the host offices. We actually want to be able to build that bridge between academia and government and the private sector, so that you know, if a student is going back to academia, they can, you know, be working with other experts in academia and really refocusing and tweaking their research with a policy focus, and same with not-for-profit sector. So it does enhance that collaboration between the three of them. So we do see this as a very positive outcome. And just on the side of this deck, you could see just where some of our fellows have ended up. I'll just switch to the next slide. So how to apply, if anyone is interested, this is all on our website, and this particular slide is really directed towards hosts. But if you go to our website and you click how to apply, it'll break down if you're a fellow or if you're a host and what you're interested in. I had mentioned, so they're both open right now. We have an open call. If you're a fellow, we close the call for you early March, I want to say February 6th. And if you're a host, early February. And if you're a host, we close early March. So there's about a month gap. So if you're a fellow, you're in February, and if you're a host, you've got until March. If you're a host, what you're looking at is providing us really an eligible position. So we want to see an actual policy challenge and a general scope of work that would be appropriate for a PhD holder. So I just want to emphasize here, it's not a co-op placement. It's not intended to be, you know, overly administrative. It really is bringing in an expert to support a policy challenge. And that's what we try to vet for, with making sure that our host offices are prepared to support a fellow over 12 months. So just breaking down some of the things we ask: policy process, some of the policy activities. What might you be looking for if you're a host office? So you need somebody with good business writing. Maybe you need somebody who understands open data. You know, whatever it is, you're really addressing that to maximize the opportunities for a successful match down the road. And we do ask as well for a reporting structure. So really making sure that there is some mentorship and accountability for the intern to be successful in the position. And if you're a fellow, we're asking you questions about your interests. So a big piece of the application is really why you're interested. So your letter of interest is very important. You're mentioning why you want to participate in public service, why you're interested in you know, really shifting your academic research and your expertise and applying that for the public good of Canada. So these are pretty important pieces. We ask questions about your academic research, you know, any awards, publications, all of that stuff, just to get a general background about what your expertise is. And we ask some questions around competencies and skills. So really, what are you looking to gain in a position? And what are you coming to the table with already through your experience? And that, again, is really intended to facilitate the best possible match and get those expectations up front from both participants. So we are coming to the end of the presentation here. We just want to thank all of the people involved in helping us run these programs. And so as you can see, we're we've got strong support from our government partners, and we want to recognize that. And I'll just end with a slide on learning more. So if you're interested, we have a website I really encourage you to check out. Lots of information there. There's data about how past years have gone. There are examples of past projects. You can always email us and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have. So call is open, apply now if you're interested. It's a really great program, and we're really proud of it at Mitacs. And so I'll just stop there and see if there are any questions. We can open it up to the crowd. So I'm seeing some questions in the chat box, and I'll try to go through them. I'll try to go through them in order. So our fellows shortlisted before the hosts are selected, and somebody answered, yes, we are. That's true. So fellows are shortlisted before the hosts are selected. So if you look at that timeline, over that month overlap where the host offices are still open and the fellow applications have closed, that's when we do shortlist, and that's when we're vetting them and putting them essentially as a shortlist available to the host offices to select based on criteria they're interested in filling. So in that sense, fellows are applying to the opportunity. They're not applying to a specific position. I know it's really hard to imagine as somebody who's an expert in your field. You're like, how could I possibly apply broadly to something, but we do see the most success in those cases where people aren't applying directly to a position. Another question, are all positions in Ottawa? They are not. So we did have a partnership with the government of British Columbia. So we actually had a cohort of about 7 to 11 fellows per year. That ran for 3 years. They tried that, they piloted that out. And so we had at one time 2 pilots, or 2 cohorts. We had a federal one in Ottawa, and we had one in Victoria as well. Sometimes we work with other partners who are interested. We really want to keep a cohort model. We find that's the most successful for the fellows, to be able to really exchange ideas and talk about how things are going and tactics and experiences and build that network. So we try to keep it in a cohort model as much as possible with the same timelines. Not always possible in every case. There are hiccups with HR. But for example, this year we have a fellowship with the City of Montreal. So we've got 1 fellow in Montreal, and we've got a bunch, for the most part, in Ottawa. So we've had fellowships in Manitoba. We've had fellowships, I think that's it for now, where we've actually hosted them. But we do consider them strategically. And on a year that's not a COVID year, we actually put time together to do in-person retreats. So there's travel for fellows that might not be in a location. Thanks for the presentation. It was mentioned that fellowship program offered training for fellows, but it was not included in the timeline. At what point does the training take place? So that's a really good question. Training takes place throughout the entire fellowship, so throughout the year, and we try to line that up with opportunities we know are going to come up. So we do orientation at the outset. So this year we did orientation around October because we knew fellows were starting between October and December. Then for, this conference is another training event we offer. So we pay for registration, and we actually put together a networking event to learn how to network and how to make best use of this conference. And then so throughout the year, as students are really getting into, or as fellows are really getting into their fellowship, then we have other training that's more tailored to that. So science communication, briefing notes, things like that. Next question, do we need to have obtained a PhD before applying for the fellowship? So you can still apply as a PhD candidate. You just need to have your PhD by the start date. So by that September. So if you're, finishing up, your defense is scheduled 8 months down the road, you're perfectly eligible to apply. We'll just check back on you and make sure that you're set up for your defense essentially, and it'll wrap up in time. Any advice on improving our chances to be successful? That's a really great question. There is a guideline on the website, so I encourage you to check it out. And really, what we want to see, some of the things we see if you're a fellow, and the high, like sometimes we have just superstars, and they get selected for multiple interviews across a lot of host offices, and typically those are the kind of people who have already had a bit of interest, like they've been thinking about how to tailor their research for the public good. So they're really mentioning that interest in policy. And I think that's something important for fellows who will make the most of their opportunity as well. If you're just doing it for a paycheck, you might be less, your chances are lower essentially for getting selected. So you really do want to demonstrate that interest. If you have, if you're participating in this conference now and you haven't applied yet, this is something great. I would mention that. I'd say, like, I went to a Canadian Science Policy Conference, and I was looking, I'm very interested in applying my research for this, and I think the spillover benefits for Canada are this. That's something really important to include in your letter of interest. And also, we see people with great publication records and awards also do well. I think it's just an easy way for hosts to validate the success. Once on a short list, whether you end up with a position will depend on your academic interest, background, and aligns with the host needs. So that's correct. So once you're on a short list, there's a bit of a holding pattern for fellows, and that's while hosts actually go through and select for interviews. So the onus is on the hosts, really. And we find there's often, like, some years, if there's a trend, then we find hosts are looking for people with computer science backgrounds, or some years there's a focus, like right now it's COVID, so there's a focus on people with that background. So we do find it can be a little bit trend based, but that's correct. We have timelines we'd share with you, and we would always keep you updated and stick to those timelines so that you're not sitting around and just waiting for an answer, but that's correct. I think that about does it. I think we're just over time now, so we've got about a minute left. Okay, so I'll answer what I can in that minute. If we have a different fellowship wrapping up at the end of a year, is there a way to delay our start date to finish up the first position? We try to be pretty strict with that, but I would just encourage you to send an email to policyfellowship@mitacs.ca and just give us a heads up so that we could at least try to think about it and consider it. So we do consider these things on a case-by-case basis, and it depends on the availability of the host as well. Is there a list of names of past fellows if we want to connect with them to ask questions? That's a really great question. I would encourage you to send this to our policy fellowship email, and we can get back to you. We don't want to send any personal information without consent, but there may be some way to connect you. People, if you're not successful, we do encourage you to reapply. We don't automatically renew that. We've actually changed the application from year to year, so we don't automatically transfer those. So if you're interested, you could reapply. And I think I'll stop there. And I just really want to thank everybody for joining. If you have any questions, again, please email. I'm more than happy to answer any questions, and my team is happy to answer questions. We also have a virtual booth, so I'll plug that, and we have people staffing it. So go ahead and check in there if you have any follow-up questions. Otherwise, thank you, everybody. It's been really a pleasure to share this program with everybody, and I hope everyone's really enjoying and taking full advantage of the conference. We're very lucky to have it online. So thank you. Thanks, everyone.